always love feedback. How do we get things better? We're going to get prescriptions, prescription trends, all kinds of clinical trial explorers, like everything. I might even get a dedicated biotech analyst or even teams. I mean, they all look pretty good. I can't believe, look at that QUBT rallied back. That thing's such a dog. It's like 200% borrow rate. No shares available on Interactive. IonQ's got this like mysterious property to it where it's like not clear why people really, their shareholders really do believe in it. I don't get it. Jensen is scared is the best cope ever. He's sitting there sarcastically telling these guys like, hey, you know, can you really even call yourself a computer? Is it really quantum computer? And the D-Waves guy's like, yeah, but it's a computer. Jensen's like, man, I'm giving you the way out. I'm allowing you to call yourself a quantum instrument. The moment you call yourself a computer, you step into my ring. And when you step into my ring, I want to see you compute. I mean, yeah, it was like a clown car. I mean, the second the public companies were like the clown show. The second group was pretty respectable. No, God-given qubit, I agree with that statement. Atoms are God-given qubits to some extent. And if you think about the transistor shrinking, at some point you get to atom size, right? I don't know if you guys know how much you know your chemistry, if you've watched my videos or not. Let's say this is a carbon atom. Does anybody know the length? What is this length of the carbon-carbon bond? And you can give it to me in angstroms, nanometers, or picometers. This is a single bond. Or give it to me in all three. Angstroms, nanometers, picometers. 1.54 angstroms. Well, how much is that? Let's see if this makes sense. That's 154 pico, or how many nano? 0.154 nano. So as a drug developer and designer, I have to know this stuff. Why? Because I have to fit these atoms and their electron configurations within other atoms, proteins, and drugs. You guys saw me work on that with 𝗠𝗏𝗡. 𝗠𝗏𝗡, if you remember that one. My lovely girlfriend made me a cassava cake. And if you guys saw it, it was one of the best cakes. Stop it. These two. You don't beat up an old lady. And you, why are you beating up a little baby? You should know better. Go. The cassava cake had red sprinkles for the red candles of the stock chart, and she actually meticulously placed the red and green sprinkles to show the cassava stock chart. If that's not the one, who's the one, right? Okay, so I'll do the rewind. I'm sorry about that, BBK. Okay, so now let's say at the center of this carbon atom, you know, I want to know the radius or maybe even the diameter of this atom. Maybe give me that in angstroms and picometers and nanometers if you can. You know, we need to use different measurements. So nanometers, what is that, a billionth of a meter? Picometers a trillionth. It's 10 to the negative 9. And this is 10 to the negative 12th. And angstrom is a funny little thing that's just basically 10 times a nanometer. That's a really nice little distance. So somebody's saying 70 picometers is the diameter. It should not be half. 70 picometers is the radius. So the diameter, so are these about one atom apart? Is that the idea? So you could theoretically fit one carbon atom in this space? Is that the concept? Sort of makes sense, right? And this bond lengthens or shortens depending on various things. Okay, so how big is a transistor? You know, they say it's 2 nanometers, but that's not true. It's not even close to true. The MOSFET transistor. This, I'm not a physicist, so I need to ask ChatGPT. Okay, the unit cell for crystalline silicon is 8 silicon atoms tetrahedral arrangement. 10 to hundreds of silicon atoms wide. Okay, so now, how big is a silicon atom? And do we know what the valence is of silicon? It's actually the same as carbon, right? But it's got one more D shell was filled. So it's saying the distance between adjacent silicon atoms is 2 angstrom. And if they're saying there's 10 to 100 of these, well, assuming even there's 10, you sort of see how much the actual fin width or length is 3 to 5 nanometers. So what is this? This is 235. This is 0.235 nanometers, or 235 nanomoles, or 235. So we're saying 3 to 5 nanometers. So that's 10 to 20 times this number. So theoretically, you could not get smaller than a silicon atom, right? So theoretically, you know, the smallest transistor, if it were a single silicon atom, which I'm not sure we know how to do that quite yet, that's kind of where you'd be. The TSM process, hypothetically at least, can't get better than 10 times or 20 times better, which is kind of a problem. And I think Jensen has said we're trying to stack energy now. It's not a compute. It's not going to be a compute problem. This is going to be an energy problem. So you're going to have a the diameter is about half, radius is half, so it's the same diameter. It's 1 atom away. Yeah, atoms are not really made out of smaller particles that you can work with. You know, I think that's kind of like I don't think that's going to work. You know, yeah, quarks are not isolatable. You know, they're kind of transient molecules, right? Or transient subatomic particles. I mean, who knows? Maybe you could coerce the universe to do your computations. But I think that, there you go, quark computing. Skip quantum. I have a pen digitizer. Yeah, it's not going to work too well. I think even single atom is probably ambitious. Anyway, okay, so point is, when we say that the atom is God's given qubit, it's a really provocative statement, and it's probably correct. Atoms have a lot of degrees of freedom as well. You know, there's a lot of information in an atom. So I think that, you know, this kind of makes sense. Now, there are a lot of kind of problems when it comes to thinking about how to... It's a good question as to why use silicon. I think it's less reactive, but I don't know for sure. It's a better semiconductor. Carbon's not a semiconductor. So if we use the quantum effect, so instead of like just saying, here's a way to look at this. So pretend, you know, this is elongated, but you could basically say this is on or off. Don't think that these are like separate atoms can be on or off, but just think about the state of the transistor being on or off. You know, it'd be either on, or we can sort of flip it off. You know, but either way, that's sort of this very binary state. We have 1 degree of freedom there, or 1 like informational dimension to work with. And what quantum computing gives us is many informational dimensions to work with. There's lots of different things you can encode here. It is pretty exciting. Now, where are the situations where scaling compute linearly, in other words, just adding more chips, and when we get really good at making chips, we can just make them like huge amounts, right? You know, imagine H100s that get even more compact, and a lot of the technique is going to be around dissipating heat and things like that. And imagine, you know, just creating massive, with packaging techniques, exactly. And you just have like rooms full of H100s or buildings even. You know, you could just stack compute. You know, you just need to get it cheaper. So why do we need a quantum computer? And that's a question I've asked and pondered for 3 or 4 months straight here. And I basically don't know. And I think if you listen to Jensen yesterday, and you listen to the companies, they say material science and chemistry. I think that if you want to actually learn some of this stuff, I encourage some of you guys, maybe, I don't know how many people are listening, but maybe 1 or 2 of you would do this. But I want you to do this. I want you to go to ambermd.org and download Amber and learn how to use it. Okay? And maybe 1 of you will figure out how to use this. I'd be surprised, actually. Run some simulations. Isn't this great? Amber began in the late 1970s. And why don't you do some simulations? How about we try a different one? I've used Amber, and I've used many of these packages. We even wrote one of our own packages. One of the reasons I knew my girlfriend was the one was that she knows this thing called smiles. I asked her if she knew smiles. Smiles is this sort of chemistry code system. She knew smiles better than I did. So that's it. This is the girl. I don't need anything else in my life. So, I use GROMACS too. It's already in my system here. And if you want to try GROMACS, you should do that too. And then if you want to try one more, try Autodoc, which is also pre-populated here in my thing. Spend your life in this software. And then you tell me you need a quantum computer when you're done. I still talk to Oleg, who created Autodoc. I think you're going to find that the quantum computer won't be useful. There's some quantum chemistry. You could do quantum chemistry in those packages, but there's some quantum chemistry DFT packages. But like, there is no market here. Let me tell you something. These packages, guess what they cost? Guess how much revenue they generate? $0. Guess how big the market is for software around this space? All told, it's about 100 million. Now, the computers that could run this software, you would need to tell a university that there's something better that would be incrementally better, or at the cost, be exponentially better. Thank you, Richard Stallman. Based Stallman. So you get no additional benefit. Well, here's my point. If you can say there are no applications, then you have to worry about the computers. You don't have to worry about the benefits. But the advanced packages for these systems don't really cost very much. And the people that use them, the packages that do revenue are like Cadence, Synopsys, companies like that do generate some revenue, ANSYS. But yeah, it's a very niche, weird market. We tried to break into it. My first project out of prison called Drug-like, trying to do ligand docking, did not work. Yeah, machine learning is increasingly being used to sort of shortcut things. I'm not a big fan of it actually for ligand docking. So for ligand docking, you're just worried about solvation, really, at the end of the day, and electrostatics. Like, this is all Coulomb's law. And you have many body interactions, but it's just not hard to do those. Ligand docking and medicinal chemistry are solved problems. The unsolved problem in pharma is, what am I docking? That's what matters. And the funny thing about ligand docking is you can get the perfect fit. You can get the least RMS 0. But what happens? You put that drug in and realize it's metabolically labeled. You put that drug in vitro and you realize it's a P450 substrate. You put that drug in vitro, you realize it doesn't work as a, it's not protein bound or 2 protein bound, whatever. So, you basically have a big problem that the computer's not going to help you that much. So eventually, there will be something. Yes, it's very hard to predict those things without just doing it. And it costs very little to do PK. Just do it in Animal, right? It's a solution that doesn't work and nobody wants it or needs it. I've never met a chemist or a physicist who said, I really want a quantum computer because I'm limited by what I can do. One of the things that I'd love to do is simulate a really big body problem in GROMACS or in something like that. And the problem with there is you're dealing with dynamical systems that, just like you have Unity and the game engines, you don't need to do, as Jensen pointed out, I don't think he found an eloquent way to say it, but you don't actually need to solve the traveling salesman problem. You can approximate it. And what he said was, I don't care if my Uber's a second or 3 seconds faster, gets there 3 seconds faster. What he really meant to say was that I don't care if it's a nanosecond faster, because the approximations are good enough. There's no the solutions for traveling salesmen and many bodies are they're more than good enough. When you play a video game, are the physics real enough? Yeah, they're real enough. Are there many bodies? Yeah, lots of bodies. Practically speaking, it works. Now look, at the microscopic level or the nanoscopic level, there is different, physics looks different, right? But we can also approximate that physics. So we're really sort of stretching at when the quantum guys say material science and chemistry, and I think they've stopped saying pharmaceuticals, partially because of me. I think I think they're really stretching, and none of these guys are actually, I think they know they're lying. A lot of them are physicists, but some of them, like Chapman, he's not a physicist, and some of these other guys. I talked to a SpaceX engineer, material scientist, and he's like, I would never need this. The other problem with quantum computing is that there's no state space. So there's nowhere to store anything. So you're really relying on regular computers. And then you'd also have this problem where, you have to keep these calculations in superposition long enough. So like you have to make sure this whole thing doesn't collapse. And in the meantime, if you're trying to calculate a huge amount of state, for example, let's say I want to simulate a many-body problem for a whole second. If you try GROMACS and Amber, you'll simulate things for nanoseconds, or if you're lucky, microseconds, but you're not going to get a whole second. But where are you going to be able to store that state and the evolution of that state? This is all just chicanery. The only serious science here is at that low level, where you're really still trying to think about how to make these gates work. And that's real science. It's great, beautiful stuff. But once you get above there, it just gets very spooky very fast. It gets there's nothing real. It's all smoke and mirrors. And quantum people know this. Every quantum person knows this. The Google guys, the Microsoft guys. The only people that know this or don't know this or know it and they're being willfully misleading are the CEOs. And I think 99% of those guys fall into the camp of they know this, but they can't say it. So if you actually did a survey of how many people really want this, it's a very, 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 very small market, and the product doesn't work. There's a lot of people who want to make the product because it's quite the achievement. It's like a Nobel Prize winning achievement. It's super cool. I'd love to do it. But there's nothing there. We have great computers now. I'd love to crack Bitcoin, but I'd actually have throughput problems possibly and state space problems. So I'm not sure that even with a quantum computer I could do it. Yeah, people have tried quantum for finance, and again, you have bottlenecks that are going to get in the way, like TRAD.io, just bus.io. Like these things are not on a chip. So cracking Bitcoin isn't a market, obviously. Medical imaging? Why would medical imaging ever need quantum? Doesn't make any sense. We don't even need the computers we have for imaging. They're too powerful for imaging 10 years ago. I don't know about that, Adam. That's what a GPU does. Neuroscience would need quantum. I think you're kind of grasping at straws. The problem with quantum is you just don't have that much space. So you have 100 million brain cells? I got that right? Yeah. So maybe if you had 100 million qubits. Look, I think, Joe, someday, somewhere, there could be an application, but think about GPUs. The amount of things we need GPUs for is very limited. They're still the biggest business in the world. It's very hard to find an application here because GPUs, the only application we had before is video games. Is it billion? 100 billion brain cells? Off by a couple of orders of magnitude. There's no computer job that you or I need to do that requires serious compute. The only companies that need this at all are like 6 companies. 6 AI companies need this. That's it. xAI, OpenAI, Microsoft. List gets pretty short pretty fast. Who needs a GPU farm? Those 6 companies, they're really valuable. There's no real need for an H100. Do you need an H100? What are you gonna do with it? We're gonna do inference on the edge. DeepSeek showed us. You really don't need much to do that. Now AI serving big models sitting in cloud serving inference up. I mean that's a big deal, but the amount of companies that need that is limited. The use is distributed quite a bit. Large, very large. But remember, Moore's law kind of like, it's always tempting to say we're reaching the end of compute. As a kid, I'd always follow the Wintel mafia, increasingly like consuming more processor resources, mostly with sloppy code, and Windows never actually got faster. But we got to a point where consumer applications we don't need more horsepower on our PCs. That's why your clock speed of your computer hasn't increased. Number of threads hasn't really increased either. It's going really slowly. You know, these computers aren't getting much more powerful. They're fast, they work. In the old days, we had to be careful how many programs we opened up. You'd palpably have the computer slow down. You'd wait 10, 20 seconds before something popped up. It was normal. It doesn't happen anymore. And I think that even AI is going to start to drop to a point where you could run some of these things on a normal computer. What lies beyond that? What lies beyond the current paradigm of AI? And then there'll be something. But, you know, the idea that you need quantum for anything is kind of sort of difficult to fathom. And I think it's difficult to fathom because we have complexity to guide us, right? We have these ideas about what algorithms are super hard to calculate, that we can't just throw a bunch of compute at it. The only reason Nvidia is getting rich right now is because nobody's figured out how to make what they make in a way that replaces their product. But eventually AMD and Intel and others, GPUs will get cheaper. They'll get easier to make. You know, it's a race. They'll get easier to use and program for. But at some point, you know, we're kind of running out of things to compute. And I think that, can you contrive problems that are really hard to compute? Yeah, of course. That's what complexity is all about. Go to every NP hard problem. But why are you solving NP hard problems? For what? Yeah, Jevons paradox unfortunately proved to not be true. Ask Intel. I guess if we include our iPhones, you know, we're using compute, but you know, we're certainly spending less on it. You know, you used to have to buy a 486 for $3,000. Yeah, I'm very suspicious. You know, I think that certainly crazy to think about these companies as publicly traded companies that you could be interested in investing in. I think it's cool that they're on the menu, so to speak, because, you know, some people might be interested in the space. But I think Rigetti probably does it best when they say, look, we're a science experiment, man. There's no rhyme or reason to what we're doing. We'll see what happens. You know, that's like really respectable, because that's the truth. But when these companies are saying quantum is now, well, they're saying that because the guy wants to collect the stock options. And if you gave his stock options comped to show me your scientific progress, not show me your computational progress, things would be very different. And I think that the Rigetti guy deserves a lot of credit for being able to tell it like it is. But you know, these guys haven't made much computational progress. Yeah, that was one of the wildest rallies I've ever seen. IonQ were all going up like crazy. I too feared for my own life. I thought the stocks would jump out of the screen and bite me. Turns out it was not to be. Now, I would be interested in these companies near cash value. What's funny is the venture world had them at cash value and still couldn't make it work. So literally all of these companies were venture funded, recapped again, SPAC recapped, and now getting recapped yet again. Imagine you could be the founder of IonQ and not have any shares left. It's actually sad that Chapman only has $30 million. He should be a billionaire. I'd hire him as a salesperson any day of the week. Yeah, I think only 30 million. I think he dumped it all. I don't know. It deserves every penny. I hate to say it. He bought a house with it, yeah. I think quantum for simulations is interesting, but I raised the point about the state space. How do you capture all that state? Where do you put it if you want to have a simulation advance, a full second or something?